what would I would have wanted to find out when I was, in at USC? If I was going into college or if I was coming in business major, what would I want to know? There's always the stuff I couldn't ever know. Like, how did that guy get so much money to buy that? And everyone always seems like, and most of the answer was, oh, it was family money. It was this money and this money. That money. But where you and I have always come together, it wasn't family money. It was door-to-door fish sales and a whole bunch of politics and I mean, your story is amazing. I mean, we don't have to get into that, but
a lot of stories for you.
I mean, one of the things I'd like to, if you're willing to explain, so that everyone in the world doesn't think it's just everyone. We aren't given properties on a silver platter. They're not. Sometimes people are, and to me, those are the ones that don't end up losing them or something, right? Or end up end up being slumlords and such.
Well, I think my story started. My father, our family are immigrants, right?
Right.
Came from Vietnam, escaped the communists, right? My father was in concentration camp when we went to concentration camp, when Vietnam fell.
When you told us that last time, I was like, wow, that was a new one. I had not heard. I couldn't believe that. I didn't realize
we were lucky enough to find our way to America. We landed here with, the shirt on our backs, and that was pretty much it,
Right.
So my mom got a job basically as an admin at the French consulate because she has a French citizenship. My father went to work at a restaurant, the Good Earth back then. It was just
Good Earth.
Yeah, like a healthy restaurant, right?
Right.
And he was a prep cook. And then while he was there, he noticed like these guys come delivering stuff all the time, food, right? So provisions.
The purveyors, right? Oh.
Yeah. And so he was like, well, I know something about seafood because I studied agriculture when I was in school. So he kind of found out, where the seafood was coming from. And he went to that store, that wholesaler.
Right. So probably somewhere downtown LA.
Yeah, downtown LA. He got a job washing fish, right? So he moved from washing dishes to washing fish. And then while he was washing
is
fish,
that an upgrade or is that a horizontal move?
That's kind of an upgrade.
Is it? Okay, I don't know.
And then he saw all these guys coming into the seafood warehouse, loading up their trucks with seafood and then driving off. And he was wondering what that was all about. And that was the day of before the Omaha steak days. Like people were selling door to door. Right. So basically he saw a couple guys doing door-to-door sales and he decided, hey, I could do that. So he saved some money, put together, got a van, throw a freezer in on it, and asked the owner if he could buy some seafood from the place. And the owner said, go for it. And that's what he did. He went out and he sold seafood door to door. And from door to door, then it got into hair salons. Hair salons is a great place to sell, by the way.
Fish.
Oh, yeah. You can sell anything at a hair salon. Because back then, you had all these women that would go in
audience.
Wife and, all that, right?
Right.
And they're sitting around talking to each other.
Hair dryers.
Got that little bee thing.
Yeah, hair dryer thing.
Hair. Right? So he comes in and he says, hi, my name is Dan. And, I sell seafood. Would you like... so to look at it, and they're sitting there. They got time. They got to sit there for a couple hours, anyways.
Right.
So they look, and everything's frozen, so it's easy, right? It's not nasty. It's not dirty. It's not stinky, and all prepackaged. So they looked at it, and they're like, "Yeah, I can buy some halibut for my husband. Buy some crab, some shrimp, whatever." Right. So soon that kind of picked up, and the next thing you know, you're in the strip mall at the hair salon. You're going to sell to the restaurant next door, right? So he started selling a restaurant. So now we moved from door to door into basically retail and wholesale now, right? So that's how he moved up.
How is he carrying? I'm picturing like like the old like cigars, cigarettes, kind of like in a frozen thing with frozen fish on it.
Yeah, so they're all packaged in a 5-pound box. Pretty clean.
Okay.
It's kind of like a pizza box except taller. And each of the pieces of fish are vacuum packed. And they're all frozen. So you open it up, just kind of like Costco when you go and buy those little freezer. You open it up. That's what it looks like.
Okay.
So it's pretty
Thanks for the clarification. I had a different vision.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's in a freezer inside the car, so it's all solid, right?
Hmm.
And he comes out and then you show them and they buy it. And you eventually upgrade yourself and go up the food chain. And he sold to restaurants and my dad, bless his heart, he is a very nice man. He's a very friendly man. You guys know him. You guys met him. Rest his soul.
God rest his soul.
He's just a nice guy, and he doesn't try to be smarter than anyone. He just wants to be friendly. And he believed in the American dream, and guess what? He did it. So he just saved money, and soon we opened a warehouse, and we started selling more and more volume. We got 3 or 4 trucks. And then I came into the business. I started at, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, helping
Wow.
him, pack fish, sell fish. Even when I couldn't drive, I would sit on the vans and train these 35-year-old guys on how to sell door to door
Like
because I
red,
knew what the
like apartment door to apartment door, like house to
yeah,
house. Like that.
house,
Yeah.
house. We did a lot in like Van Nuys, South
Okay.
Bay. You just drive down the street, park at a corner, and just walk, right? Come up to people, knock it. Back then, everything was much nicer. People.
Right.
So
People weren't
you
so
come up,
skittish.
you knock on the door, and somebody says hi, and you say, "Hey, do you like seafood? We're just selling. We're neighborhood seafood guys for here, and we'd like to offer you some seafood at wholesale prices. Blah 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 blah." Right? And so they buy. And so yeah, that's kind of how it worked. Then we got into restaurants and we sold to some big chains,
Mhm.
and I started to work with him on the buying side. So as soon as we start buying at high volume, now we're getting into not just retail wholesale, but brokerage. So you see
Brokerage.
how that evolves, right?
Right. Right.
And so I got up to a point where, as a teenager, I'm moving container loads of seafood, right, across the country because
Wow.
I'm able to sell to restaurant chains, Las Vegas. I sold to Las Vegas. I sold to ship liners, airline carriers. So the airlines, they serve us food when we fly. Well, they
Sure.
buy all this stuff, right? And so we're able to get in there and do that. So it was pretty cool. So that's how the business started, and
Such a great
we
story.
saved money, and we saved a lot. Very much a penny pincher, old school. My father believed in the millionaire next door.
Millionaire next door.
The book.
Hmm.
It's essentially, you save yourself to wealth, right? And you know what you're going to make, but if you're really smart at saving, you can be wealthy, right? And so
Correct.
that's what he did. It's not like he hit, crypto or bingo or something like that. He just earned it a nickel at a time.
Right.
And we bought our first apartment, which was a 4 unit, right around the corner from where our home was, right? And so the 4 unit, and then we have a couple of our drivers live there with their families,
At the
right?
home.
So that kind of worked out, because at least they work for us. We know where they're working. They're going to
Right.
pay rent and they're going to take care of their place. And we rent out a couple of units. And then,
And you can verify their payroll.
exactly. And then they're close to us. We have, we watch out for them. They can go to work very easily. So it works out well. And then soon we got up to an 8 unit. So that's kind of how it worked. And then I went to college and I graduated. And at that time, I was initially working for my dad, but you know, working in the family, sometimes there's a little collision, if not a lot of collision. And
I can imagine.
because I was young and just coming out of business school, I was thinking, oh, I can do this. Dad, let me run it, right? And he was like, no, 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 no. You got to understand, you got to save, save, save. And I was under the impression of make, make, make. If you can make more money than you can lose, then you're always going to do well. So those are the two different views of
Hmm.
how to generate wealth, right?
That's it. Those are two different. I don't think I've ever had it presented that way. There's the save
Yeah.
everything no matter what, or make more. So if you lose, it's just as long as you're making more than you lose, it doesn't matter how much you're losing. Just keep making it, right?
Keep
As long as you're
making, right?
selling, you're
Keep
never going to be
making.
losing, right?
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was a conflict because my father didn't like that. If you keep making, you tend to be more aggressive and you take more risks,
Mhm.
right? So I would buy container loads, and if I'm supposed to make 2% margin on it and I'm a little scared, I'll go and make 0.5% just so I can move it so I can buy the next one,
Right.
right? Move on to the next fight, right? So that's always growing, growing, growing. But my father was like, well, you sell at 0.5%, maybe you make some money, but what if that debt becomes problem, right? So it's a receivable problem now. They
Hmm.
don't pay, then you're hosed,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, there's so those things kind of came along. I learned that practically. And so, anyways, I decided I didn't want to do this anymore. I figured I was going to strike out on my own. So I started my own computer business. I was making computers, buying parts, building them, selling them, and I
Those are the
started my
days.
own business.
The days of where you could go to computer shows and get all the components and build it for
Right.
half price
Correct,
that
correct,
you could,
correct.
that Best Buy would sell it for. Exactly.
Yeah, so I did that for a while and it was pretty good. I started that business. I had about 5 people working with me, two
Oh,
partners and a couple of employees. And we would go to these computer shows and we would set up our, tables where we'd have to buy 2 or 3 tables, rent
hmm.
them, basically,
Right.
right?
Right.
And all of our stuff and, buying chips and parts and everything and build it as people come up.
Wow.
And then one day I had a friend of mine show up and he said, hey, can I just get a corner of your table? Because I want to sell some CDs, some discs, some
Right.
software.
Right.
So I said, oh, sure, take half a table. So he shows up 10 minutes before the show, comes out with these plastic tubs, and he puts it on there and he sets it out. Me, I got to get there 2 hours earlier, set the banner, get the workplace all set up, make sure,
Right.
all of this stuff. And I've invested a lot of money in memory chips, CPUs, cards, all kinds of stuff. So and I look at him at the end of the day, he's making a ton of money and I'm still just trying to break even. The
Selling
capital
CDs.
investment was so intensive on hardware versus software, it didn't make any sense for me. So I sold my business, I got out of it, and I said,
So true.
I need to go do something else. So I decided to take my business degree and go into consulting. And so that's what I did. And the consulting business actually took off for me. I started with a small company called Arthur Anderson.
Yeah. It's small.
And
Is that where you started it? Was it like intern style mailroom?
no,
Like
no, no, no. I
where
was
did they start you
already
at?
I was already in my 20s and had experience, but I had to join them at an entry level.
Right.
So I joined them at an entry level. I did work for them, and I have technology experience. I understood technology.
You're
So they
building
hired me
computers.
in, and within like a year and a half, I knew that I could grow very fast. So then I switched from there and I went to KPMG.
Hmm.
And so I joined KPMG, and they really took advantage of my hunger to learn and my ability to move fast, and also my sales acumen, right? Because I've been selling since I was a kid, right?
But since you're selling if you can sell door to door fish in Los Angeles, I mean, you can sell ice to Eskimos. I
Right. So I was selling, and
mean, completely.
I was somewhat, educated, right? I had an MBA. And so I was educated, I could sell, I understood technology. Those were like good traits to have during that time. This was way before the internet bubble, even, right?
Right.
So that's why kind of I just rode that up. Now, during that time, I made money as a consultant. It's a good career. I became a partner with the firm very early. And the thing about my profession working for the big accounting firms, Big Four, is that we're not allowed to really buy stocks or do investments because there's so much conflict of interest.
You have inside
Yeah, so
knowledge.
if I make 100,000 after taxes, I probably get to keep 60. I pay my bills, maybe I get 20 left or 10 left. I save it. I save it. I save it, right? And then but I can't invest it. So I just save it. And then a couple years later, that 10,000 becomes 50,000 because 5 years is every year 10,000, whatever, right?
Right.
50,000 at the time I could invest. So my dad was like, "What are you going to do with all that money? Well, just give it to me." So I did, and he bought more buildings. So, we would run across a building for, let's call it $1 million.
Mhm.
And at that time, you could put down 300,000 to buy a building. Even now you could do that, right? So, if I drop 50 and he drops 250, we're now owners of a building.
Right.
So, that's how it starts.
So is that
And
your essentially your first real estate deal on your own, or that you invested in
well,
was with your dad?
I invested with him, and again, I'm so grateful for him. He ran the show because he once I left the seafood business, he was like, "Okay, there's no point in running this anymore. I'm not going to go and push fish all day long. It's too
Right.
tiring. I'm going to switch everything into real estate." So he took all of his money and he put it into real estate. He bought like two, three little buildings, right? And so I just invested with him. And then, we talked to our family members and some of our aunts and stuff. They invest too. So you got a little bit of a syndicate going on,
Right.
people investing together, and it's all family. So,
Or legit family, not just like,
yeah, yeah.
hey,
And
family.
so then that kind of grew. And now, 30 years after I've been at KPMG, I'm retired now.
Congratulations. That's like as of like a week ago. Like, how when
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
that? You made
I'm
it, man.
yeah, I'm supposed to retire at 60. I'm about 4 years ahead. But
So awesome.
I figured, why run? I told her I don't want to run towards a brick wall and splatter like a grape. That's just not the way I want to run my life.
Right.
I got a little vigor left, and I've been wise enough to invest everything into real estate. So I got a portfolio now, and so I'm kind of Bob the Builder. Got a tool belt, got a wrench, got a screwdriver and a hammer. Go knock on doors, fix stuff, and collect rent. But actually, I don't have to do much of that because I got you guys now, right? You guys,
Indeed.
I mean, by the way, that little gadget that you put in the front door with the video and all that, that
Oh,
thing's
yes.
killer. It saves
You
us a
like
ton
that?
of money, man.
Oh, very. I'm so glad you like that.
Love it. I want it on all the buildings.
We're working on it. Yeah, we're absolutely
Yeah,
working
you
on it.
guys are you guys are great.
Remember I sent you the
Obviously,
text? I'm like, hey, I got something cool that's going to save you
yeah,
money.
you
It's
got
going to be
something new bringing
free
my way.
and it's free and it's going to save you money. Can I put it on your building? You're like, do you even need to ask
And
me? I'm like,
and
well, yeah.
you can tell the audience here, I don't have just one building, and I don't just have one property management company,
Oh,
right? I use a lot of different ones for various reasons, right? But I'm over the moon with Kyle and yourself and Chris.
thank you,
The
Danny.
beachfront guys are awesome. The bad news for me is I've been giving you guys praise from the bottom up, and all of the, regional managers, property managers, they get promoted all the time because I keep telling them
It's
how great
true.
they are. And so now I got to deal with new people coming in and retrain them for you guys, which is okay, by the way.
We
But
appreciate it.
I really appreciate the relationship, the partnership, right? I get time from you guys. I have a question. Maybe I don't want to do something. Maybe I don't want to fix something. Maybe I do want to fix something. Should I do it? How should I do it? Why should I do it? You guys give me, a lot of advice on that, right? And it's realistic. It's an owner mentality that you guys are providing me, right? So
We do our
and
best and thank you, Danny.
and
Appreciate
and,
the
and I
praise.
have my own team too, right? I have my own crew, so I
Right?
have my own
Right?
property management team that they carve out a different piece of the work. And so I think right now I'm at a point where, because I just mentioned I'm retiring, I'm building a structure that is going to be able to sustain this business going forward beyond me, right?
Legacy.
So I'm creating a family office where, I want all the because once you get into the property business and you know how to run it, and hopefully, knock on wood, you're making money,
Hmm.
right? That money, you don't want to spend it either. So that's the saving part. right?
Right.
So back to my initial thing, you got to make money and save money. That's the double whammy.
Double
Right?
whammy, right?
So I was in KPMG. I made a lot of money, but I saved it. So I did what my dad taught me to do, and I also followed what I wanted to do. So now every year, I actually have to buy a new building because as the property makes more money, I want to offset that income with some depreciation and cost
I
segregation,
say, would you use cost segregations, right?
yeah, so depreciate it, save taxes. But basically, I'm asking Uncle Sam to bet with me, right? So I'm not avoiding tax, I'm just delaying it.
Right.
So Uncle Sam's like, Danny, you're doing a good job. You know what? I'll double down with you. Go buy another one.
Danny, would you mind explaining that? I understand cost seg, but coming from an accountant, entrepreneurial, real estate investor guy, I don't think is anyone
I
who could
get
probably
it.
explain it the best way. Could you give us
Yeah,
like
yeah, I can
the
explain that.
1 minute of
So,
what cost segregation on a multifamily building is and how it relates
yeah, yeah.
to
So the basics of it
you?
is I have an asset that is an investment vehicle, so an apartment, right?
Okay.
And as any asset, it depreciates. That's the accounting rule that, over time, the value of there's wear and tear and all of that, right? So it depreciates, and then you have to re-maintain it. You have to up it again, right? So if I bought something for $1 million and I'm making, call it $50,000 a year on it, but my
Mhm.
cost of maintaining that is 20, right? So then I deduct that and I only have $30,000 left, and therefore I pay taxes on the $30,000,
30,000. Right.
right? But if I am accelerating the depreciation, right? Because I think that the building is wearing and tearing and all of that. And I go out and I get an estimate from another accounting firm that does the depreciation calculations for me and compares it to other buildings of its type to make sure that it's appropriate.
Mhm.
Then I can tell Uncle Sam at the end of the year, well, you know what? I made 50,000, but it wore out 50,000, so I don't actually make any money. Even though on a cash basis, 50,000 came in, I have a
Right.
$50,000 credit because of the wear and tear. Now I have that $50,000. Uncle Sam's going to tell me, well, by the way, you're still going to pay taxes as soon as you take money out, right? And I said,
As
well,
soon as you claim
actually,
income, right?
yeah. And I said, actually, I'm going to take that and buy another building,
Right.
right? So I buy another building. So this is the saving part, right? So I'm
Mhm.
not spending it, I'm saving it. So Uncle Sam says, okay. So whenever you sell that building that I just gave you credit on depreciation, you're going to pay me the profits on that based on taxes. But then I take that money and I apply it towards another building and I buy another building. And again, if that does well, I'm going to pay taxes on that building too, right? I mean,
Right.
you can't, you know, death and
And
tax,
to be
right?
clear, this is not 1031 exchange. This
Not a
is
1031
right.
exchange. I
Just
didn't
being
do
clear.
didn't swap anything. I just
Mhm.
took profits out and accelerated depreciation and used that net positive to buy another property. But when I sell it, now I'm liable for the taxes on the profit of the building anyways, right? So basically I'm just deferring my tax payments till later.
Right. And
So what
when
that
would you,
does is a couple of things. When it gives me cash flow a little bit stronger, right? But it does kick the can down the road so that when I sell the building, I have a bigger tax bill, right? Now,
the
I'm
first
doing
one
this
or
on
any of them?
purpose. I'm not selling,
Right. You never sell. Right.
never sell, right? So then I just get to keep kicking it down the road. And I've built it in a way that when I pass and my children take over, they are going to go in, they're going to say, oh, here's $1 million building. I can sell it for $1 million. And I'm going to tell them, by the way, you're going to have to pay extra taxes because I already took profits out and deferred taxes for a while. So it's not going to be that much profit, right?
Right.
And that would probably get them to think twice before they kind of run in and try to buy themselves a Ferrari, right? And so I'm going to tell them the opposite. By the way, if you came up with a good job and saved some money, you can invest in this. And then over time, this is the golden goose. This is the golden goose that keeps laying the golden egg, right? You don't
Completely.
chop that goose and roast it. You
Oh,
just leave it there, let one egg every year, and you just eat that. It's not big. It's just an egg. It's not as meaty as the whole goose. You know what? It keeps coming. It keeps coming every year. And so my idea is really to build that business for legacy, right? That's my sort of concept of a family office is get everybody to pitch in, continue to
Hmm.
buy and build. So that's the, you know, make more money than you can lose,
Make more
but
money than you
save
can do
more
this.
money than you make, right?
Save
So
more money than you
these two
make.
together suddenly creates wealth, right? And so what I've learned from my father, and most people will say, well, how do you buy a building and then suddenly get another building? How do you get that snowball to grow so big, right?
Good question.
You gotta choke it on both sides. You gotta sacrifice and make commitments for 10, 20 years on both sides of that equation. Make a lot of money, don't spend it, right?
Patience.
Patience. And once you do that, and I keep telling my kids, at 15 years old, I give you $100. That's a lot of money. You can have a lot of fun. At 25 years old, I give you $1,000. That's a lot of money. Have a lot of fun. 35, I give you 10,000 bucks. That's a lot of money, a lot of fun. But you know what? When you're 65, I give you $1,000,000. That's when you can really spend it.
Right.
Because you know, so if you can wait from 15 to 65, this 50 years, there is a chance that that dollar that you keep on saving becomes $1,000,000,
Right.
right? The
Compounding
law of
interest, if you want to go that
compounded,
way, right? Yeah. Yeah.
interest and
Yeah.
profits, right? And
Correct.
you all this idea of kicking it out down the road, cost education, all this stuff combined does allow that sort of hockey stick of
Right.
growth, right? And frankly, spending a $1,000 or $10,000 at a young age ain't really going to be much. But when you're at, my age or 10 years from now, and I can spend $100,000 or $1,000,000 on something, I'm really going to enjoy it. So really knowing when to enjoy the money at the right time, right place is also very important. And when to sacrifice and when to invest and when to work. Very, very important.
When to
These are
just
things,
white
right?
knuckle it through that seasoning period for the loan or whatever it is you have. Sometimes
But
you.
my father always said, in life you suffer first and enjoy later. You don't enjoy first and suffer later. Because if you enjoy first and suffer later, guess what? The suffering is pretty long and pretty hard,
Ruthless. Yeah. It's that
right?
like that fourth day in Vegas. You shouldn't have gotten ahead. Should have went home on the
Exactly.
third day.
Exactly. So that's kind of how I got to where I am, with my dad, and we did not, get a windfall, but
Oh,
we earned it, and I did get a lot of education, support, and coaching from my dad, and I
did he?
did contribute to this pie, as much, if not greater than what he's already contributed. So
Wow.
now I feel really excited about it, and I'm on this kick that's called the Encore career. So I have a career already. Yeah, I work with Big Four as a
Uh-huh.
partner. Flew around the world, did all kinds of stuff for 30 years, right? So
30 years. That's
all bona fide, all great. But now, I want to have an encore career. And I heard this as a term, and I researched it. An encore career
encore career.
is basically where you're in it for the using your skills for the betterment of those around you. And that could be, religious, that could be political, that could be social, whatever you want to do, right? So my
Sure.
career is really to build something that is sustainable for generations to come. So I'm trying to build it for, my family, my aunts, my sisters, nieces and nephew, basically, right?
Right.
And it gets complicated because now you've got the future of, umpteen people who might have an interest in this business in some way or fashion. They may get
Right.
into some arguments, they may have some life events. And so you got to predict all of this and figure out how you're going to preserve this golden goose, the goose that lays a golden egg without somebody trying to chop the head off of it and, liquidate it, which So I've been working on that, trying to make that, and it becomes an incentive for the future generation to continue to feed that goose. Does that make
Uh,
sense?
Absolutely. I was going to say, how do you, the complexity of that sounds, I mean, you've probably dealt with this kind of complexity in your KPMG days. I'm sure it's much, so maybe perhaps you're used to it. But for me, looking now, I didn't have a family hardly at all. I don't have any brothers or sisters, nieces and nephews. And anyway, I'm the last Henson and that's it. So how does the family dynamic work with it? How do you protect against, like what you said, that one person
So
that wants the goose dead?
you protect against that by having to actually create engagement with your family, right?
Great
And
engagement.
this is great because now I can get closer to my family. I get to talk to my children, my nieces, nephews,
Interesting.
right? And I
Very
I, I
interesting.
get to share with them and coach them, right? And sometimes they're like, "Well, I don't want to hear, about this stuff." And no, I'm not telling you, I'm not lecturing you. I'm asking you, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do? What makes you happy? What's fun for you? Uh, do you like to ski? Do you like jewelry? Do you like vacations? I want to know all that stuff because I want to
Ballroom dancing, swing dancing.
whatever. Exactly, right? My dad was big into ballroom
Right. I
dancing.
remember.
And what I do then is I take an interest in that and I tell them, well, that's great. And how are you going to pay for all that? Right. So they probably have ideas, they don't know, whatever. And I tell them, look, hey, you have a stake in this family business. I just want you to know it's not a huge stake because, it was 4 or 5 people and now it's umpteen people. So it's
Wow.
smaller, right? But this is something you can look forward to in terms of an investment vehicle. I will tell you now that if you try to take it out, it'll be very small because I explained to them the tax implications and again,
Similar to a 401k cashing out too soon.
I'm an American. I love being an American. I'm going to pay my taxes every day.
Amen.
I want to pay my
Amen.
taxes. I just don't want to pay it 5 times on the same
Nope.
dollar. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Exactly.
So that's that. I'm good with that, right? So I've set it up that way, and so I tell them, hey, this is what you got to think about, and inspire them to think about what they want to do and how they could contribute to this. And two things. One, they need to know that there's some safety net out there for them. That way, they respect the elders and the investments we've made on their behalf, right? So they hear
I
that
see.
story, they know they're being loved, in both
Love the
qualitative
comparison.
as well as quantitative ways,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Because you have
Now,
the safety net, but it's hard to get to that. You have to fall pretty far to get to it. And you don't really
yeah,
want it if you have to fall that far, but it's
right,
there.
right.
Allows you to take
So,
risks.
so I use that to kind of incentivize them, and there's that engagement. And for me, it is actually very, very rewarding to be looking at a business which is not driven for cutthroat purposes, right?
Right.
I'm in it for harmony. So what I need to do is then predict things that'll happen. Like for example, somebody might get hooked on drugs. Somebody
Right.
may get divorced.
Right.
Somebody may want to start up a Bitcoin business. Whatever. Everybody's got all these ideas and umpteen different people there. I got to figure out how to manage all of those eventualities. So now I'm dealing with lawyers and accountants and figuring out how to put in protocols for all that. It's
Interesting.
kind of cool. So it's
Yeah. I mean,
a little bit of family governance, a little
absolutely.
bit of generational orchestration, which some people may not like those words. Like, why are you in the position to orchestrate what happens with everyone's life in this family? My answer is like, well, if you don't like it, you don't have to be a part of it.
Yeah. You don't like the rules, you don't have to be part of any of this
Because you
game.
didn't make this money, I did. My dad did.
Right.
And so I mean,
Yeah.
hey, we're and the first thing we do is we
Love that.
subsidize all the education for all the kids. So that's
Pay
that's
for
what we
wherever they
do.
can get
Hey
into kind of
man,
thing.
My dad's big on that. As long as you want education, doesn't matter what. If you want to go to PhD, we'll still support you, right? We don't support the whole
Very
thing,
cool.
but we give you some subsidies for your education, right?
Anything they want to do.
Yeah,
Theater major, art major,
yeah.
anything. Okay.
Anything. Doctor, underwater basket weaving. I don't really care, right? Education's key. Because,
Education is key.
as an immigrant going through, political regime changes and all that, we know one thing is true. You can't take away this. You can take our house, you can take our cars, you can take our clothes, you can take our money. You can't take away our intelligence.
So true. Right.
So we're going to invest in intelligence, right? And I can go on about that for a while. But
I
anyways,
I I came from that exact space, and it was getting a full ride to USC, fight on, was what changed it. It allowed me to get out of the continuum of poverty that my family was in. Like
absolutely. Yeah.
I was the only one that's gone to school and still have been, and I got
SC is awesome.
it allowed me to level up. I mean,
My sister went to SC and UCLA. I went to LMU, right? I still serve on the
it's
board of
cool. That's,
Regents at Loyola.
my wife
Yeah.
went to Loyola, LMU as well.
Yeah.
That's
So,
right.
I mean, we try to
Fantastic
have a
school.
good head on our shoulders, right?
That's
And
right, man.
so that's what I'm doing now is putting that together and then engaging the next generation to let them know what I'm doing. And, they can come back to me and say, hey, I don't want it. I don't want to be a part of it. Or, hey, I want it. I want to be a part of it. That's up to them, right? But they got to go through school and graduate and do all that stuff first.
Talk a little bit, Dan, if you're willing. How do you structure it? I have my living will and trust. How do you structure it? I've been asked by clients and such that in a way to where it's like incorporated and like more insulary than like if one of the buildings get.
So
I'm talking
I'm not
about.
a lawyer. I'm not
Neither
an
mine, nor do I
accountant.
play one on TV.
So please don't take this advice as
Oh,
certified advice. But
in your experience, how have you seen it
what I've
work?
learned, and I've paid a lot of money for this, with lawyers and et cetera. So what we do is we take all the various assets that we have, whether it's investments, property, cars, whatever, wine, whatever, right? You
Wine.
put it into an LLC. I have a small wine collection. Anyways, so you put it in an LLC and you register the LLC. Obviously you go and set up an LLC. It's $800. You put
Just
it in.
one
No,
LLC.
no, no,
Oh,
no. One for
multiple
each
each.
assets,
Okay,
right?
including so you have one
And
for wine.
for wine, I just shove it into one of my other ones. But
Okay.
what happens is why an LLC is like an apartment building. It collapses, earthquake, somebody sues us, and blah, 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 blah. You want to just have that problem be that one problem.
LLC.
So if you have five buildings, one building in Texas, one building in Seattle, one building, you don't want a building in Seattle to affect something that's in Texas or in Florida, right?
Correct.
And so they're each their own building. Two is each of the investments are different in terms of percentages and who has the majority, who has the minority, et cetera.
Does that make a
So
difference?
it does. It does. So we put assets in different LLCs, and then the LLCs then have a share. Then we set up trusts, and there are
Okay.
lots of different trusts. So usually there's a
Hmm.
living trust, which is the current trust where my daily checking account and all that is coming out of, so
Which is
that
what
if
I have.
someone
Exactly.
someone hits me while I'm walking across the road, all of that money that I have in my checking account, call it $500, right? Doesn't require a court order to decide who gets it and whatever. It's in the trust already, and it's already said, hey, it's going to be
Got it.
split. It's going to be given to my wife, right? And if she dies, I know it will split to my kids.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is all the big assets, you want to put it into different types of trusts. So there's a type of trusts that are called generation skipping trusts or dynasty trusts.
That's a word. Generation
Yeah,
skipping trust.
yeah, the dynasty skipping trust. So basically what it is I put this
Yes, T.
asset, call it 50% of a building, into this trust, and this trust now is a person, quote unquote, a legal entity. And that trust is now responsible for paying taxes and all that on that property. And when I pass, that trust owns that property. Well, it owns it now because it's a irrevocable trust. So then my kids will either get paid out of the trust for
Mhm.
any income, or they can borrow against the trust, right? And they have to
See,
pay interest. But if they want to dissolve the trust, then they have to pay taxes on everything that the
all
asset,
the depreciation and
all of that
all of
stuff
it,
catches up to them, right?
right?
But if they don't touch it, they leave it alone, then they don't have a tax event. It just sits there. And when I pass, there's a step up. Basically, Uncle Sam gives me a gift and saying, "Oh, we're sorry that you passed. We're not going to charge you for your profit during that time, so you get to up your
Okay,
value of it, right?" So then my children, if they don't use it, they pass it to their children. So that's why it's
okay.
called generation skipping, because until you actually touch it, you don't pay taxes because the entity is already taking care of taxes. So it just rides along generation to generation until somebody needs to take it out, then you pay the taxes. So again, you pay
So
taxes only
all the
one time.
LLCs of each building is in that one generation
Well, we
skipping
have
trust.
multiple
We have
trusts.
multiple. Okay, you have multiple
Yeah. So it
generation
depends
skipping
on how
trusts.
you why you want to do it, for what purposes, and who is a beneficiary. So, I have
I
one for
see.
me, I have one for my sister, So that's how we do it. So there's a lot of different trusts floating out there. And there are gift trusts, there are irrevocable trusts, this is all up to the lawyers and accountants to have to talk to you about, because the way the laws work right now is, I think you're only allowed to transfer a certain amount of money to your recipients, or your inheritance, or your heirs, right? So if you have
Hmm.
$1 billion and you want to send that to your heirs,
Right,
Uncle Sam's going to say, "Well, that's a lot of money. I want my taxes now," right?
right.
But if you got, a million, 2 million, they're like, "Okay, fine, just let it ride, and we'll get the taxes when somebody actually uses it," right?
Interesting. Oh, so that's why
So
you divide it up.
I
I
think the
see.
number
Okay.
today is somewhere around, I want to say a round number of $12 million. So if you have $12 million, you want to put it into trust and lock it up in there, and then let it ride till whenever somebody wants to actually take it out, right?
So that's
And
the threshold.
maybe
Then start a
maybe
new
your
one if
kids don't
there's
want to touch it. Maybe
right,
knock on wood, your kids are awesome. They're making, a gazillion dollars. They don't even care about that. So then they don't need to pay taxes on it, right? Because it just sits out there for their kids, right?
right.
So there are all these thresholds on all these types of trusts, and how much you can sock away. And then there are other vehicles too. Gifting is another one, where if you have over, let's say if you have over that 12 million bucks and you still have money left over, how do
Right.
you defer some of that tax? So there are different strategies for that. And again, you need to find a tax lawyer,
Certainly.
you know.
This is more than I've had anyone expense. Couldn't you set up multiple generation skipping trusts? Then once you hit the 12 million, you hit the next one. Kind of like the 250,000, 250K
Well,
FDIC insured.
I think it's
Like,
12 million per spouse. So like, for example, I get 12 million, my wife gets 12 million, right? So theoretically we could do
theoretically.
24 million, right?
Okay.
If we were so fortunate, right?
Right. Right.
Uh, and so on and so on.
And but it's based on asset value, or is it revenue of the asset?
So that's a good question. Depends on the lawyers and how you set it up. Usually, you can try to get it at book value, for which is what you bought it for.
Okay.
Sometimes they ask you to do it at the appraised value, so then you have to get an appraisal and see what it's
Okay.
worth today.
Huh.
And but I think either way it still works. You just sock it away, and then if you got, if the audience has more than 24 million, then there are other things you can do beyond that. But in general, the idea is to put it in a separate entity that stands on its own. and
Right.
then let that entity hold on to it and not sell anything.
Never
It still
sell.
pays tax on income. Again,
Sure.
I'm all about, paying fair share of taxes. I'm not avoiding tax. I'm
No,
not trying to get around that. I
you just
pay
know
my
the rules.
taxes.
Yeah, you just happen to know the rules really
Yeah,
well.
I use the roads like everyone else, and I like my
Right.
roads to be nice and clean, not with a bunch of potholes. And I want my cops to be around and be friendly, right? I
That's
want
right.
that.
Of
I'm good with that. Obviously Kyle's a ex-cop and all that.
course. I mean,
So I love that, but I just don't want to pay taxes 5 times on something, because if I didn't put it on the trust, when I die, I put the money to my kids, they pay taxes on inheritance, and let's say
mhm,
they don't use it, and
right.
then they pass it on to their kids, pay taxes again on inheritance, and so forth. And then it's like, well, why are we paying so much taxes on the
Right.
same dollar that, I earned, right?
That's already been taxed so many times. Right. Exactly that. That's
And
no,
that's not the intention of Uncle Sam either.
but he will let you do it. He will
Well,
let
if
you.
you if you're
He'll,
smart enough to make $1 million,
you
you
should
should
be
be
able to
smart
do
enough to
that.
ask the question on how do I pass this on? Does
Exactly.
that make
Right.
sense? I mean,
100%. I had a CPA friend of mine says like he's like the it's not illegal to find a loophole and use a loophole if there is a loophole, as long as it's not you're
I
not
don't even think
extorting
it's
the
a
loophole.
loophole. I
It
think
just wasn't
uh,
covered in the law. It's not
it's what
strategy.
Uncle Sam wanted us to do. But if we ignore it, if they send a ballot to today, what is November? Is it November?
Yeah,
October
next
28th,
week.
right?
Next week.
So another week away, right? So they send us a ballot, and you're supposed to open it up and read it. If you don't read it and circle the dots, then you don't vote. That's your problem, right? I mean,
Right.
so yeah, I think really these are simple things. All of us, uh, taking a step back, every single person in America, your dream is really to own a home, right? I mean, that's the part of the American dream. So,
100%.
so
100%.
real estate is really a big deal in everybody's dream. And by the way, we are so fortunate to be here in America. America
And
is the same
you
size geographically as China and Russia and probably Brazil. So these big countries, right?
right.
We only have 350 million people.
Right.
And yet China has like 1.3 billion people,
Billion.
right? So they got a lot more, they got 5 times more people than we do on the same amount of dirt. But by the way, our dirt's good because it's arable and you can plant, you can grow stuff
Oh,
the whole
yeah.
place. In China, only 20% is arable. How do I know this? I lived in China for 10 years. I
Right.
went there to build our KPMG's business, right? So I know what that is all about. And they have a lot of pressure in driving stability and wealth for people, their citizens, that are 5 times our number in 1/5 of our space.
Wow.
So we are so lucky here.
So fortunate.
This America is destined to succeed. Look at
Right.
we don't have a problem like Russia with ice all over the top, right? I'm not even talking politics. This is geography,
No, this
right?
is just what it is.
And
Exactly.
so real estate falls right into that. And America is so great. We allow people to own real estate. You don't
Right.
lease it, you actually own it
Yeah. Legally. Yeah.
legally, right? It's yours,
Right.
right?
No, right.
So, hey,
You're not going to have land pirates as easily, and if they come, you can get it back by law.
and if you look at many of the large companies out there, they always have land and real estate as a big part of their asset, on their balance sheet. And definitely individual wealth is driven by real estate too, right? I
All
mean,
the big names, Rockefeller,
past
Carnegie.
president and now competing to be president, he's a real estate guy,
Mhm.
right?
That's
Yeah.
where he's been most of his days.
Yeah. And his dad gave him what he started with. So yeah, real estate is a good deal. And for us, I just wanted to kind of maybe wrap up here.
Sure.
The mission for me and our business is really to help the immigration and immigrant story. I'm not buying buildings that are posh, $10,000 a month rent.
Right.
I'm in the low income housing business, right? But I want to buy buildings that people can come, they live there. It's walking distance to a market,
Hmm.
walking distance to a school for kids, walking distance to some sort of job opportunities, whether it's a hospital, restaurants, supermarket, whatever, right? And they work, they build their family in a one bedroom, two bedroom kind of scenario, even a studio. And maybe after 5 enough money to get out and move on to something bigger, right?
Right.
So my family did this. We want to enable this for others. This is an immigrant story here. I want to perpetuate the ability to create a platform for immigrants to come in here and work hard, earn hard, and get on with their lives. Now, that works very well for me because rent control is a problem for owners. And if they voluntarily leave after 5 years, I can up the rent. I can turn the unit and improve and make more money, right? And I don't want them to stay for 30 years. If they're staying for 30 years, they're probably not moving up in society and they're in,
Right.
probably not a good place to be as a low income housing for 30 years. So,
Mm.
I want to encourage my tenants to be upwardly mobile and be able to succeed in life and live the American dream that I have benefited from, right? And I want to give back in that way. Does that make sense?
That's awesome. Yeah, I never knew that was your perspective on your building. It's beautiful,
That's the
really.
perspective
It's
on all the buildings that we have.
uh,
That is the guiding principle. I go down, I have no problem talking to my tenants, shaking their hands, going there, sit in their house, chit-chatting with them. A lot of owners don't do that, right? They
mhm.
just kind of look at their tenants as a different class of people. No, I came from there.
I was there once, right?
Right?
Right,
So I'm good
exactly.
with that. Let's wrap. You're from the
Yes,
Philippines, you're from El Salvador. I don't you're from Iran. I don't care. Let's just talk. Right?
right,
If I can't talk to you, then maybe I need to be worried about that. You're in my apartment,
right,
right?
right. Yeah,
And if I
especially if they
see
don't want to
there's
talk to you.
cockroaches running around, maybe I call
Yeah.
that out to you and say, "Hey, you need to keep this place clean because it's my place."
Right. Not telling you something exactly.
Right? So I think this is the way I run it. And
And
obviously this is a mom and pop. If I had thousands and thousands of units, it'd be harder. But I have close to 400 units, and I'm still able to do it.
it's
Why not?
no small amount. I'll tell you that.
Not that small.
No, not at all. Not at all. What advice, coming from your amazing story, Danny, what advice would you give to someone starting out in real estate, like calling it an immigrant or anyone, just don't know anything about it. They've gone to school, got that part, and they want to be you. And then,
So I get that question a lot, and I get that question for people who are earning $1 million, people who are earning $100,000, and really, I think the only barrier is commitment. And what is commitment? Commitment is overcoming fears and willing to sacrifice.
overcoming
That's what
fears and
commitment
willing to sacrifice. Right.
is. So there are a lot of people that are like, well, I don't know if I could do that. And then they get out and they drive their BMW or Mercedes off. Well, I'm like, well, shit, if you drove a Prius, you probably just saved $50,000 right there,
Right.
right?
Right.
Notwithstanding maintenance and gasoline and insurance and all that shit. And
Mm,
by the way, we live in LA. If you drive a Prius, no one's going to laugh at you. And stars drive Prius, right? I mean, Prius actually looks pretty cool, right? Like, what's the deal? Why can't you do that? And maybe it's only for 5, 6 years. Come on, this,
right.
sacrifice. And then the other bit is fear is like, oh, I don't know if I buy it. The management's too crazy. It's scary and all that. Well, you're right. It is scary. With a business partner like Beachfront, that fear has gone away. You owe me a beer.
I owe you
Actually, no,
several.
no, no, no. Whiskey. So, but anyways,
Uh,
you have to look around and get to know people. I network. I go out there and meet you. I go out there and meet the other guy. I talk to people.
right,
I Tonight I'm going to go meet some brokers and have a couple of drinks, throw some back, and then talk about the business, right? I'm
right,
learning. I'm not sitting around waiting for a property management company to show up and tell me I got this right, I can do it for you. I've gone through a lot of property management companies to find you guys. I had some
right,
failures, I had some slips, but you know what? I'm not fearful of it because I know I can do it, right?
right.
And you got to get into it. And this is maybe, somebody said, well, Danny, you grew up as a child selling and all this, and I am not doing anything magical. In fact, what I'm doing, I feel like I'm very slow because I see a ton of people that are doing this much better than I. And so I'm humble enough to go out there and find them and try to ask them, how did you do it? Why are you at 2,000 units? How can I get to 2,000 units?
Right.
Right?
Right.
I'm still struggling with 400. I need to get to 2,000. Right? And and people who have zero look at 400 and they're like, oh my God, that's humongous. It's not.
I can't even pay my rent. Yeah, exactly.
It's not. It's not. This fear and this ability to sacrifice is the dynamic that you have to have. And the fear allows you to make more money than you can, than you think you can. And the sacrifice allows than you think you can. And that gap is the winner.
I like that. The fear is what drives you and makes you do more than you think you can, and saving the money allows you to
Yeah, so you got
hold
to
on to more
overcome
than you
your
think you can.
fear and you got
Right.
to make your sacrifices.
Right.
Otherwise, you won't get there. I mean, if you look in the news today, the Economist, America is the most productive economy and society in the world.
100%.
Why? Because we got a lot of immigrants here.
We all
Right?
came from people who wanted to
All of
be
us
here.
are
Right. We
immigrants.
all of us did. We came from
There's
some
not a lot of
scrappy,
natives sitting
scrappy
around
people. Yeah. Right.
yeah. And even if there are natives here, guess what? Over the few hundred years, we've kind of blended. So
Right.
yeah, this is where it's at.
We
Don't be
we all
afraid.
we came from an ancestors who crossed oceans on for 3 months on
Don't
a
be
ship, and maybe they
afraid.
make it. Yeah.
Don't be afraid. Make a
Be afraid.
sacrifice. And be ready for the terrific results. It'll come.
Yeah, it will come. It is the hardest thing is to get that first deal. In my experience,
I
it's like
am,
let's get that first
I
one.
come from a completely different perspective because I work both in corporate as well
Right.
now as in entrepreneurial.
Right.
I can tell you what I'm doing here is not rocket science. Anyone could do it, and I encourage them to do it. There's so many safety nets out there. There's so many people that want to share. You just call up anybody, call up any realtor, and they want to talk your ears
Oh
off
yeah.
to do this, right?
Yeah.
One of my
Father.
favorite, Brent Sprinkle.
Yeah. I've
I
had him on
talk
the
to him
show.
all the time. He's
Yeah.
got a great story. I got a ton of realtors,
Right.
bankers. You just go and talk. Don't need to buy, don't
Right.
need to spend, just go and talk. Most of the time,
And
they'll even buy lunch for you, right?
free lunch out of it. Yeah, let's go lunch. Exactly.
Right? Just there's so much knowledge out there. If you're not knocking on those doors, well, what can I do?
Real estate people really, in my experience, love to talk about real estate more so than other industries for whatever reason. It's not like we're sitting around counting our money. It's not about the money. It's the strategy of like how we're going to take this thing there and turn it into something here. Like what? Because it can always be done, but just like how and how much
And
and
if you're
if,
really that introverted, go to Google. I mean, geez, you can Google this thing and have a ton of information there.
Totally, totally. I've always found the part of real estate is just the real part, like you say, Danny. Like meeting people, talking to people, doing like what we do here. We're on a podcast talking about real estate, and it doesn't feel like a podcast. We're just having a conversation. It always just feels like that. And I think because it's real, it's something you can effectuate change upon. Whereas
Absolutely.
stocks, and if you're watching the stock market, what can you do besides buy or sell,
Well,
put money in
you
or
can
out.
buy stocks. I'm not knocking stocks.
Right.
Now that I'm out of the firm, I can buy stocks.
Right. Are you going
But
to?
I think that diversification is always a big part of the strategy. And so, you got a little this, a little that. Why not?
The great battle of debates we have had over usually several drinks is with stock guys like stock market hardcore Wall Street guys, and they never seem to have any money in real estate. It just doesn't cross. And then the hardcore real estate guys, me being one of them, very seldom have much money in the stock market. And when you sit here and like crash heads, I'm just like, one question I ask them, like, if your stock drops 20%, where's the money go? Where'd it go?
It'd
And
be
no
pretty
one's been
hard
able to
for real
explain to
estate
me.
to drop 20%.
And you know where it went, like all your tenants left, or it fell down, it burned. It wouldn't just evaporate. They can't tell
And
me.
with stocks, you really don't have OPM. You can't use other people's money, right?
No,
But in real estate, you can. So you have
absolutely.
a loan. So as long as whatever you borrow, you make better than that, you're leveraging,
Yeah, and you're making the world better. You really are. One building
right?
at a
And
time.
you don't want to build a stock portfolio on margins. That doesn't make
No,
any sense because the downside is so large,
right.
right? That's why when you have a loan, they like it to be collateralized with a real asset.
Well, in multifamily, sometimes you can collateralize it with its own asset. If it's a big
That's
enough
right.
loan, it should be able to do that. And you can
That's right.
personally guarantee on the smaller stuff, but when you get into anything north of like $1 million loan, the asset itself is collateralized because it's not the structure, it's the rent that's being paid from the structure that
That's
they
right.
look at, right? Which is, and you can also do with the magical word of forced appreciation, which tell me something else where else you can do that, and you can actually make the stock go faster and raise in like you can produce you could double the stock value in a year if you're really after it, if you really want to. You can,
You coat a paint, some
yeah,
more flowers, and suddenly the value of your apartment goes up.
right, right. Yeah, there's all kinds of different strategies you can affect. You cannot do that to your Apple stock on the ticker. You can just watch it. You
Can't
can't
put
go into Apple
lipstick
and be
on
like,
that.
I'm going to change this. I want to change that.
Yeah.
All right, Danny. There's one last section of our podcast here. I call it the rapid fire round, where it's 6 quick questions. They're about just random stuff. I'm just going to ask you. You say as much as you want or as little as you want. I'll just keep asking it. Nothing crazy.
Right.
Nothing to trip you up. Nothing.
Go for it. I
Nothing
got about
ludicrous.
another 5 minutes.
That's all we got. That's all we need. Ready? And here we go. Best advice you've ever received.
Best advice I ever receive. Oh my God. Feed the friendly, starve the stupid.
Feed the friendly, starve the stupid. Love it. Number 2, you could have dinner with anyone. Who would it be?
It would probably be with, I want to say either Trump or Barack Obama. One of those two, because I think there's something really special about the way they think. If it was just one person, maybe I'd probably like to have dinner with Bill Clinton. He's probably got some funny stories.
Oh, I bet he's got a few. Favorite business book ever?
Business book, Seven Habits. I mean,
Habits.
that is a great book. Yeah,
Stephen Covey, right?
yeah. Stephen Covey's so basic, classic, tried and true.
Favorite podcast?
Favorite podcasts. We're here. Outside of you, probably
Trevor's property
I do
protests.
listen to some of the podcasts off of The Economist. I'm a big fan of The Economist. They have a lot of very interesting, very deep, insightful articles as well as podcasts. I'm big on them. Yeah, I read them all the time.
2 more. What's your favorite failure?
My favorite failure, my own failure. Probably my favorite failure is drinking too much. I like that last drink. So probably doesn't do well for my waistline. And I just need to know that, I don't need that. I just should just not do it.
But sometimes you learn so much from that last drink with that person.
Exactly, exactly. But so yeah, so whenever I'm out, I'm like, okay, I could do one more, and I say no. So it's that failure is I've never had a problem, knock on wood yet, right? And so I just don't want to get in that problem.
Play it safe, walk the line. And last question. Biggest inspiration in your long, successful career? Who or
Biggest
what?
inspiration, I think, is still my father.
Your father.
Um,
Very inspirational man.
he is when he was around, I would conflict with him a lot.
Really?
Couldn't stand being around him. We would fight every time we're, 5 minutes in, there's a difference of opinion.
Wow.
But now, as time passes, you forget all about the pimples and the blemishes, and you only remember the bright lights and the insights. And I see it clearly. He is an amazing guy, and I'm very thankful for everything he's done for me and for everyone around him. And so he's been very inspirational for me.
Uh, he was an awesome man. I did have the pleasure of meeting him. You and I didn't know each other yet. We actually, I knew your dad before I knew you.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I got he had all the building photos of your buildings in his house, and your mom had a stick, and she would point to each one, and he would tell the story of each one. I remember sitting there.
Yeah, he
But I was
would
taking notes. It was amazing.
dress up in his little suit and then tennis shoes and walking around with his little cap on and his briefcase. That's how he kind of ran his life. And he looked like a dork. And
A dork.
he talked about, he always wanted to talk about ballroom dancing, how great that was. And I just realized how inspirational that all was for me.
Well, that is a fantastic place to wrap our show at, Danny. Thank you so much for your time, my friend. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap.